Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Castilla. After playing the Numancia ship request, I got a little curious. What are these Spanish burst fire cruisers like? Turns out it's pretty fun. Yep, nearly full health dev striking Asylum there with our burst fire. It's very powerful, this burst. This AP is very, very strong, and this ship is very fun when you get to do that. However, we do not see very many Castillas in the game these days, or at least I don't. Looking at some of the alternative sites, this ship tool can give us the last 3 updates. How often was this ship played? Well, not very often. It was the 5th least played Tech Tree Tier 10 cruiser at 17,300 games or so. That's not a lot, considering Guden, Des Moines, over 100k games in the same time period. It's a rare ship to see, and I think there's a few good reasons for that. Mainly having to do with the armor of this ship. Unfortunately, while it looks like a Napoli, you do not have Napoli armor. This ship has 30mm deck armor and upper belt armor. So while you have some very good guns for your tier, it's a ship that really can struggle to deal with flanks like this one, where we're going to be almost on our own. Our Schlieffen is understandably going for the islands and probably trying to brawl it out in the middle of the map. Open water against a Jaeger. There's actually a Jaeger and submarine division here, so going to be difficult for a Schlieffen to deal with that. That's one of the reasons we're so passive as well. Well, there's a Colombo too. I think you know why we're a little bit cautious over here. That's the real issue for Castilla. I played this ship actually quite a lot over the last week or so since that Numancia ship request. And I had some good games. I had some fun matches, but I found myself constantly feeling uncomfortable. This ship is not small, and it has not great detection as well. Considering the size and the relative lack of armor, I'm surprised by how poor this ship's detection is. Its base detection is actually worse than things like a Marseille, for example. It's very difficult. Also, we're seeing the the experimental ships coming into the game. Vyazma there, that is a tier lower than us, that has much larger caliber guns, also gets burst fire, and gets super heals. Better armor too, I think. Yeah, it's a little bit rough out here for the Castilla, but we're going to have an incredible game. This is easily my best game in Castilla that I've ever had. It's going to start off quite slow, but as we've talked about a lot in the past, patience is required when playing cruisers at high tier, at any tier really. We have some heals, which are going to be very useful. As always, higher tier cruisers get that advantage over their mid-tier counterparts. One of the reasons I don't enjoy those mid-tier cruisers very much is that you can't play as aggressive, or you can't take as much initiative without the fear of your game just being over thanks to a battleship salvo or a crossfire you weren't expecting. Castilla and many of these higher tier cruisers can afford to try a little bit to take the initiative. Here though, a main, a Colombo, a Vyazma, Jaeger, submarine. This is a tough flank for us, of course, and we can't exactly use these islands either. I was thinking about going towards that island in front of us, a pretty common island for a lot of cruisers, especially ones that don't have a lot of armor. Maybe you should try to use island cover, farm over that, be patient, don't open water early game. Maybe you get a little bit less damage output because the island will be blocking some of your salvos on different targets, but at least you won't be taking fire in return. Unfortunately, there's carriers and plane spotting in this one, so that island wouldn't be all that useful, and I think I probably would have died rather early. So instead, I'm taking the more passive approach, a little bit challenging approach into a lot of these battleships, but fortunately, Maine will not be overmatching our 30mm of armor, and this is where I don't want to just constantly call for buffs on every ship, because that's how we get massive power creep in this game, but I think a lot of cruisers could do with deck armor that is around 40mm or so. Maybe just enough to auto bounce, not get overmatched by any battleship in the game. I think that's one of the reasons a ship like a Togo at tier 8 feels so comfortable. Not only do you have heals at your tier, which are really good, you also have that 41mm deck armor. I think it's 41mm, which allows you to auto bounce battleship shells at range, allowing you to not take those 20, 30k overmatching hits from most battleships. Colombo's a bit of an exception with the sap, of course, but a lot of the battleships will do that same damage to a lot of these cruisers, especially at Castilla with how large this one is and how overmatchable it is. That, I suppose, is something for wargaming to consider. I do see overmatch as a bit of a necessary problem in this game, as if you couldn't overmatch a lot of these ships at close range in particular, suddenly you're just easily able to outbrawl a lot of battleships thanks to DPM. And while I don't think this is a fully rock, paper, scissors game, back in the day it certainly did have more of that feel when I started playing all those years ago in 2015, where as a cruiser, you did not want to fight a battleship in open water, closer ranges. You were at a severe disadvantage. As a battleship, if you were caught alone against a DD, good luck. There was nothing you could do. And as a destroyer into cruisers, a lot of the time, felt the same way. It wasn't purely a rock, paper, scissors. That would not be fun at all. There were still gameplay opportunities, of course. But I do think looking at the range, the passive nature of the game, and how cruisers really do struggle these days into this meta of long-range overmatching ships, I think we could make it a little easier for some of these cruisers to play. Certainly ships like Castilla are very, very difficult because of that. You just take so much damage because it's a big, relatively clumsy ship. It's not one like, say, Henry, which recently got its engine speed or its acceleration back in an update where it can dodge some salvos. This ship has a very difficult time dodging salvos. It's not especially quick. The acceleration isn't especially good. Your rudder shift is pretty slow as well. So you have to be quite careful with it. It's a ship that wants to play on the flank. It's a ship that wants to take initiative, but one that does not have the armor to do so, unfortunately. This, of course, is a very difficult problem, as if we removed overmatch altogether, suddenly everybody's just able to bow tank or kiting tank every salvo that comes through, and then everybody's just shooting HE at one another. And I don't think that is the kind of gameplay we're looking for, especially closer ranges. I don't think it's too controversial to say a cruiser probably should be at a disadvantage against a battleship in a brawling scenario at those closer ranges. So you can let me know in the comments down below what you think. Obviously, I'm just one guy with an opinion, and I certainly am a little bit biased towards battleships, but I do play these cruisers a lot as well, and I do want to have fun and enjoy them. And dealing with this long-range overmatch is quite frustrating in ships like Castilla, but a lot of other ships as well. Things like Hindenburg come to mind, where with the super ship version, the Clausewitz, it gets a 50mm deck armor. Clausewitz has worse firing angles for basically the same DPM as Hindenburg, and yet it is much tankier and much easier to play because of that 50mm of deck armor. It still has that same 30mm upper belt, yet it can tank so much more. If Hindenburg got even a 40mm deck armor, I think it would be an incredible ship again, and one that could stand up to a lot of battleships these days and become that sort of battleship Hindenburg role that we used to see back in the day. But I think I've probably talked enough on that topic. We should talk a little bit more about Castilla. If you're interested in going through this line and getting this as a tier 10, this is a flank where it's hard, okay? This is as difficult as it gets, maybe. Maine not overmatching us. Maybe if there was a Vermont or an Ohio, I suppose, that was overmatching us. At least we can bounce those shells. Vyazma, very difficult for us to deal with as well. You're going to notice a lack of fires as well. I've been shooting a lot of HE here, and while the HE has decent damage, our HE DPM is pretty close to the same as a Henry, which is quite impressive. Henry, always known as a good HE farmer. The problem is your fire chance, and your fires per minute are some of the lowest at tier 10. Only Petro has worse fires per minute. And that's a bit of an issue. It has 6.6 base fires per minute. And if we look at Henry, Well, that has 9.1, and that's even ignoring this burst fire. This burst fire is a reduction to your DPM. It's not like these experimental ships where at close range, they can burst fire and improve their DPM. This ship has some downsides to using its burst fire. So you lose out on 5 or 6 seconds of sustained reload by using this burst. So it's not actually helping your fires per minute, where something like a Henry and its reload booster, sure, it's a limited consumable, but that massively buffs your DPM. It buffs your ability to land consistent fires. So when do you use a burst? Well, you're probably going to use a burst when someone's about to get out of your range, about to go behind an island. That's pretty common. But also when someone's looking like they could angle to you like that Colombo. A shot of opportunity with the AP in particular is really, really valuable. It's really important to condense your damage output into one scenario, one specific instance in time, rather than having the DPM. That's the whole idea behind battleships and shot holding. If you do manage to find someone broadside, especially at high tier, they're likely not going to stay broadside for that long. And the ability to condense your fire, your damage into that one instance is very, very powerful. And that's the idea behind this Castilla and its burst fire. It's okay to lose DPM when someone makes the mistake of walking out in front of you. The Castilla here, I mean, we should one-shot him, right? Only 2 citadels, unfortunately, 11 overpens. We'll talk about that in the future, but I want to talk a little more about this burst fire real quick. It's really powerful, and yet it does have a downside, and I think that's really important to have with such a powerful gimmick. To be able to condense so much fire into one instance in time, you should have a penalty in that scenario. And I think that's a really interesting design for Castilla. I just think it could use a little bit better detect or a little bit better armor, I suppose, to afford it to take the initiative more often. And classic, one salvo does more damage there into his angled ship. We do have these 254mm guns, so our overmatch is rather decent here at 17mm, getting through the Colbert there. Now, brawling is not something you want to do in Castilla. You do have a bit of an icebreaker, which is nice, but it's not like a Napoli. We're nowhere near that tanky. Our torpedoes do decent damage. We're going to hopefully hit a few on this main. And I'm expecting to die here. Given the HP, we're probably dead. So we may be using that trick with the torpedoes to get a more sharp angle or a more favorable angle on the torpedoes forward. But no, main actually doesn't kill us there. Somehow. And then I rushed the torps anyway, even though I had plenty of time. Silly me. We can burst them at close range and shatter, unfortunately. Shatter and overpen. A lot of overpens here. Let's see. Back turret burst? Surely. Nope, 3 overpens. There we go. It's a citadel. This AP is rather weird to use. It has really good pen, and yet it feels like pretty inconsistent a lot of the time. I'm surprised we didn't do that much damage to that Colbert when he was broadside, but I wonder if we just overpenned his citadel. We have really good shell velocity, we have really good pen, but our fuse times are normal. So maybe like battleships at close range, it's a bit of that go broadside tech. But how did I live there? How did I live? That was the question on my mind. How did I live? So here's a little clip of a replay of this main. My angle is not good here at all. He's gonna shoot me. I am able to get my torps off, so definitely we are not at a favorable angle to us. Our torpedoes have a 30-degree angle forward here. He easily should be able to citadel me or even just get full pens and finish me off here. But Castilla has some weird spaced armor, which I will show you at the end of this video. And I wonder if there's some weird aim bugs or I don't know. But I think his shells actually all go high here. So maybe just a bad aim point. It's hard to know without seeing the actual aim point. But we all know how many bugs there are in this game with the aiming. But let's be honest here, I just should not have lived that. Pure RNG, a bug, either way. I should not have lived that. I would way rather die in situations like that and have to do with less overmatch. That would be my preference. Nice burst fire in on the Tromp here. Yes, we're even bringing this game back. What a comeback, eh? Almost 300k damage. This was not looking so favorable for our team. So a good opportune push by Castilla helped out with some incredible RNG to let us live there. And 4.2 million potential damage in a Castilla, and I'm complaining about armor. I know, right? But it felt uncomfortable. I played a lot of games in this ship. It felt very uncomfortable to play this ship in a lot of matches because of its poor maneuverability and the need to play open water a lot of the time, spot for yourself a little bit more. It's rather difficult. Here, Trump, can we finish him off? Can we get the 300k? Not quite. Maybe a little bit overled, but I think that last salvo should have hit him still. The shells just kind of went over and below his ship, unfortunately. But still, an absolutely incredible Castilla game. I got a few more clips to show you of the good moments that this ship really can have. It's a strong ship. It's a good tier 10. It's not overpowered. It's got an interesting mechanic in this burst fire that I really do like. It's just hard to play. I think that's what it comes down to. It's just really, really hard to play it in today's meta. And maybe that's down to the range too. If the meta wasn't so passive, so pre-kited, so overmatch heavy, it would be a little bit easier. On to a match with Ocean, actually. I'm someone who actually enjoys this match because it is so different. Perhaps not in a cruiser that gets overmatched by 30 millimeters, by 30 mil battleships, though. The ones that overmatch 30 millimeters, that is. But there's almost no battleships in this game. So you're going to see why we're able to play so aggressive and take so much of an initiative. And this is where I really realized Castilla is just awesome to play. I had an absolute blast playing this match in particular. This was really, really fun. And I wish I had the ability to play like this more often in a ship like this one. And it really came down to that lack of armor. That's why I've been kind of talking about that for more of this video. I think a small deck armor buff would help this ship out a ton. Hindenburg here can do quite a lot of damage into us, so we got to respect that. Also, double Shimakaze. So we're going to kite a little bit, but still wanting to keep damage output high. Switching over to the HE now that he's angled, but the EP doing some good damage when he was broadside. And I think perhaps playing this ship, I shot a little too much HE. I thought it would be better than it was. The AP is probably what they've designed this ship around, given that you have 315 millimeters of AP pen at 15 kilometers. More than enough to get through basically every cruiser when they're broadside. So waiting for those opportune moments, burst firing that AP, being a little more patient, a little less DPM focused, probably would net me better games. And as I was playing this ship, I certainly found that a little bit more often. But the HE is still a good tool to have. 42 mil pen is more than enough for battleships at this tier. I think it's just the fire chance that was a little bit lower. Not burst firing the Shima here. Interesting. Should have burst fired, by the way. That's a mistake, because this is a perfect example, actually. Because now, my next salvo is when he's angled, and I want to finish him off, or help my team finish him off. They would have got him anyway, but sometimes you never know when spotting's going to fade, right? But imagine how much damage, how much more consistent damage I would have done into his broadside there. Even with HE, you can guarantee much more damage into a lot of these ships just when they're at their most vulnerable with this burst fire. Yes, it's a loss of DPM, but not all damage is created equally, I guess we could say. Unfortunate, not quite hitting Hindenburg there, but a little bit of blind fire, I suppose, as he was going dark. And yes, here we are. We're getting to the clip you saw at the very beginning. Just applying pressure at these, at 10 to 15 kilometers here. Another Citadel into that Hindenburg. It's good AP damage. I think maybe helping the consistency of the AP or something. I don't know. I was trying things like Outnumbered, but it's so hard to proc Outnumbered in random battles to help with the dispersion. Because I want more salvos like this one. This is the type of salvo I want to get. This is hilarious. Like 5 Citadels in a burst. That's crazy. That's battleship levels of damage. It's really, really good. It just didn't feel that consistent. Or perhaps I just got unlucky on ships like that Colbert in that last game that we played. Perhaps it was just poor RNG and dispersion there. But if that happened more consistently, man, oh, it'd be so good. Well, not that it isn't good. It's just a little uncomfortable to play, I guess. You know, maybe I should have run some range mod. I know, range mod over reload mod, how boring. But if my main complaint is that it's difficult to play in today's passive meta, I probably should have run some more range mod builds. That feels bad to lose out on DPM, but if the goal is to find those burst fire opportunities, condense our damage into one instance, maybe range mod to make the early and mid games more comfortable against more of these matches, more consistent against more of these passive games, and then the burst fire can carry us at closer range or those mid ranges when we get the opportunity. That could be an option as well. It sucks to constantly be thinking about running range mod on all these higher tier cruisers, because again, that just reinforces, oh, everybody play passive, right? But I suppose that's on Wargaming to alter the meta and shape what players play and how they play. Maybe the new airstrike ships and experimental ships aren't helping that as much. But we'll see. Maybe we'll get more aggressive metas going forward. The new game mode that's coming, the respawn game mode, I'm very interested to play that one. That could be a really, really fun time. Really good consistent damage into this broadside Richtofen in here. So not really getting terribly many overpens, a lot of full pens. The larger the ship is, the more of those full pens you do end up getting. Look at that, damn, 11 full pens there. That's really nice. It's, I guess, those really light cruisers that you have to be concerned about. Maybe that's where the, I don't know, waiting for them to angle, that feels bad too. Wait so you can overmatch them. Sometimes I do that in a battleship even. Don't shoot them broadside, shoot them when they're angled a bit. But a blowout in this one, a lot of blowouts happen, of course, that's not as fun. But a really interesting example of taking more initiative in Castilla, I think. And it was really, really fun on that ocean game. Last couple clips here in Castilla. Plasma at long range. This is 16 and a half kilometers of range. We're going to use the AP, waiting for that broadside. We have good AP pen. I wasn't sure if we would quite be able to Citadel him, but we'll try the burst fire anyway. Decent aim point, maybe not quite enough lead. We'll see how dispersion plays out for us. And yeah, we could have Citadeled him. We could have killed him. But dispersion did not act in our favor. It is cruiser dispersion. I know. Complaining about dispersion all the time, right? But cruiser dispersion, you know, it's good, but maybe with only 9 shells, that's part of why I'm feeling it's a little bit less consistent. Broadside Iowa at 9 kilometers now. Again, burst fire. Not the best damage to start with. There's the Citadel. It is possible. Iowa also a ship that cannot overmatch our upper belt or deck armor. It's nice. It's nice to have a little bit of tankiness. You know, our bow and stern sections are vulnerable to things like Iowa. I think that would be an interesting change to help some of these cruisers out in the open water, long-range games, not to just get permanently overmatched and locked out of some of these matches. Last one to show you. Well, yeah, we're definitely losing this game. But you gotta respect the Castilla burst at close range. I'm just hoping that the Utrecht or Annapolis walks out broadside to me and I can get one last salvo here. That's all I was really hoping for. And Annapolis obliges! Yeah, Dev Strike. We're gonna die too, but that's okay. It's a fun ship in those right scenarios. When you can get on that flank, when you can get those bursts at mid and close range, it's really fun. It's just hard. It's a really hard ship to play. And maybe that's the point of a ship like this, is that it's more difficult to play. Maybe that you get more consistency than a battle cruiser, because you have cruiser dispersion, not battle cruiser dispersion. But you don't have the armor of a battle cruiser. Maybe that's the thought process behind something like a Castilla, perhaps. Although some of those battle cruisers also don't have the most armor. It's a tough one to play though. So I don't blame people for not playing a ship like this. It is hard with 30 millimeters of armor. It's a larger ship. Again, that maneuverability is quite tough. Either you got to be incredibly sluggish to accelerate, so then no speed juking, and then you have a little better rudder than this, or you have an 11.5 second rudder with this size of hull, and that is not easy. 820 meter turning radius is not great either, I would say, but 30 millimeters here, 40 mil, a tiny icebreaker. It's not amazing, but a tiny little bit of one. It does, I think, do enough to protect some of your citadel. But yeah, the armor's not great. What is interesting, though, is you get 40 mil, then 150, then another 40. You have a lot of citadel protection, even though it is above water. All of this spacing here sometimes will bounce shells. It's a bit of that black hole armor we see on the French ships, or that started that trend. Each time it gets to one of these armor plates, it has to do another auto bounce check. And sometimes when you're angled, maybe not quite angled enough, it'll get you get you some auto bounces. Although I think with that main, most of those shots probably went up here and just overpenned through us. I guess. I don't know. I should have died there, man. That's the thing about this game. It's not... I wish it was more consistent. Maybe it just can't be. Maybe this is just something I don't realize. But, I mean, at close range, broadside, shouldn't I just explode? But also at the same time, at long range angled, shouldn't I take very little damage? That's just how my brain makes sense of it, or tries to make sense of this a little bit more, or what I would prefer to see. Here's one of the builds that I was running. I was trying to get the outnumbered thing, again, trying for that accuracy. It was hard to proc, though, in random metals especially. Running things, something like heavy AP shells, I think is a good idea, because you should be trying to use that AP more. It's still really good alpha regardless. 18% fire chance here, maybe trying to take demo, get up to 20%. Could be an interesting way to maybe get a little more consistency out of that HE. It's got really good alpha damage, this HE, and solid pen. 42 millimeters is great for tier 10 as well. It's just, I don't know. I just didn't have the best HE salvos, perhaps. Perhaps it was just misaiming, I think, was the other thing. I don't know. It's hard to play, considering that something like Napoli is the same hull, but yeah, 40, 60, 60... much larger turtleback. Yeah, it's a lot tankier. Also 750 meter turning radius, so you know, it's a little more maneuverable, much better armor, but the guns here are more consistent. You do get cruiser dispersion, so that's generally why I think so. Perhaps you saw this coming. Larger cruiser with 30 mil plating that doesn't have the best detect is challenging to play in 2025 World of Warships. Perhaps not a surprise, but it was interesting to play it again. And I'll probably try and go over some of the other ships that we haven't, or that aren't as popular, just to see what they're like this year. Maybe something like Martin, that's even less popular. San Martin, even less popular than something like a Castilla. Could be interesting. Bit of a zombie ship in that one. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.